The Hardy Boys, The House on the Cliff, Chapter 15. Dire Threats. Snatman, once he had recovered from his first consternation and surprise at finding the Hardy Boys in the underground room, was in high good humour. He turned to his man. "Just in time," he gloated, rubbing his hands together in satisfaction. "If we hadn't come here when we did, they'd all have escaped." The Hardy Boys were in silence, sick with despair. They had been sure they were going to succeed in rescuing their father, and now the three of them were prisoners of the smuggling gang. "What are we going to do with these guys?" asked one of the men. The voice sounded familiar to the boys, and they looked up. They were not surprised to see that the man was the red-haired one they had met at the Pollitt place when Frank had discovered his father's cap. "Do with them," Snatman mused. "That's a problem. We've got three in our hands now instead of one. Best thing is to leave them all here and lock the door." "And put gags on their traps," suggested a burly companion. Red objected. "As long as the Hardys are around here, they're dangerous. They almost got away this time." "Well, what do you suggest?" "We ought to do what I wanted to do with the old man in the first place," Red declared doggedly. "You mean get rid of them?" Snatman asked thoughtfully. "Sure, all of them." "Well," Snatman gazed at Mr. Hardy with a sinister look. "I should think we have enough on our conscience already." "You have enough on our conscience already," Snatman the detective exclaimed. "I don't expect you to let me go," he added bitterly, "but release my boys. They haven't done anything but try to rescue their father. You do the same thing yourself." "Oh, yeah," Snatman sneered. "Don't bother about my conscience. Nobody ever stands in my way." "As to letting these boys go, what kind of fool do you take me for?" Snatman shouted. "If you three are such buddies, you ought to enjoy staying together." The smuggler laughed unpausingly at what he considered a very funny remark. Frank and Joe's minds were racing with ideas. One thing stood out clearly. Snatman had said the Hardys almost escaped. This meant that no one was guarding the secret entrance. "If we can only hold out a while," they thought. "The Coast Guard will arrive. There will be nobody to stop them from coming up here." Then suddenly a shocking possibility occurred to the boys. Suppose the Coast Guard could not find the camouflage door opening from the pond. During the conversation, four of the smugglers had been whispering among themselves in the corridor. One of them now stepped into the room and faced Snatman. "I'd like a word with you, Chief," he began. "What is it now?" The smuggler's voice was surly. "It's about what's to be done with the Hardys, now that we've got them," the man said hesitantly. "It's your business what you do with people who make it tough for you when you're on your own, but not in our gang. We're in this for take them out of the smuggling, and we don't stand for too much rough stuff." "That's right," said one of the other men. "Is that so?" Snatman's upper lip curled. "You guys are getting awful righteous all of a sudden, aren't you? Look out or I will dump the lot of you." "Oh, no, you won't," replied the first man who had addressed him. "We are partners in this deal, and we're going to have our full share of what comes in. We ain't risking our lives for love, you know." "We've got another idea about what to do with the three prisoners," the third smuggler spoke up, "and I think it's a good one." "And what is it?" Snatman asked impatiently. "We've been talking about Ali Singh." Frank and Joe started and listened intently. "What about him?" Snatman prodded his assistant. "Turn the prisoners over to him. He's got a friend named Foster who's captain of a boat sailing to the Far East tonight. Put the Hardys on board of that ship," the first smuggler urged. Snatman looked thoughtful. The idea seemed to catch his fancy. "Not bad," he muttered. "I hadn't thought of Ali Singh. Yes, he'd take care of them. They'd never get back here. He smiled grimly. From what he told me about his friends of his, the captain probably dumped the Hardy overboard before they got very far out, the man went on smugly. Seems like you don't feed passengers if you can't get rid of them. All the better. We wouldn't be responsible. Leave them to Ali Singh, chuckled evilly. He'll attend to them. Snetman walked over to the cot and looked down at Mr. Hardy. It's too bad your boys had to come barging in here, he said. Now the three of you will have to take a little ocean voyage. He laughed. You'll never get to the Coast Guard to tell your story. The detective was silent. He knew further attempts at persuasion would be useless. Well, Snetman said, haven't you anything to say? Nothing. Do with me as you wish, but let the boys go. We'll stick with you, Dad, said Frank quietly. Of course, Joe added. You sure will, Snetman declared. I'm not going to let one of you have the chance of getting back to Bayport with your story. The ringleader of the smugglers stood in the center of the room for a while, contemplating his captives with a bitter smile. Then he turned suddenly on his heel. Well, they're safe enough, he told Red. We have that business with Burke to take care of. Come on, man. Load Burke's truck. If any policemen come along and find it in the lane, we'll be done for. How about them? Asked Red, motioning to the Hardys. Shouldn't they be guarded? They are tied up, tight. Snetman gave a short laugh. But I guess we better leave one guard anyway. Malloy, you stay here and keep watch. Malloy, a surly, truculent fellow in overalls and a ragged sweater, nodded and sat down on a box near the door. This arrangement seemed to satisfy Snetman. After warning Malloy not to fall asleep on the job, and to see it that the prisoners did not escape, he left the room. He was followed by Red and the other smugglers. A heavy silence fell over the room after the departure of the men. Malloy crouched gloomily on his box, gazing blankly at the floor. The butt of a revolver projected from the hip of his pocket. Frank strained against the ropes that bound him to the chair, but the smugglers had done their task well. He could scarcely budge. We'll never get out of this, he told himself ruefully. Joe was usually optimistic, but this time his spirits failed him. We're in a tough spot, he thought. It looks as if it will all be on that ship by morning. To lighten their spirits, the Hardys began to talk, hoping against hope to distract the guard and perhaps overpower him. Shut up, you guys, Malloy growled. Quit your talking, or I'll make it hot for you. He tapped his revolver suggestively. After that, a melancholy silence fell among the prisoners. All were downhearted. It looked as if their fate was truly sealed. Chapter 16. Quick Work. In despair, the boys glanced over at their father at the cot. To their surprise, they saw that he was smiling. Frank was about to ask him what he had found amusing about the predicament when his father shook his head in warning. He looked over at the guard. Malloy was not watching the prisoners. He sat staring at the floor. Occasionally his head would fall downward, then he would jerk it back as he struggled to keep awake. Snetman made sure a poor selection when he chose Malloy as guard, the boys thought. Several times the burly man straightened up, stretching his arms and rubbing his eyes, but when he settled down again his head began to nod. In the meantime the boys noticed their father struggling with his bonds. To their amazement, he did not seem to be so tightly bound as they had thought. Both of them tried moving, but could not budge an inch. The boys exchanged glances, both realizing what had happened. Dad resorted to an old trick, Frank thought himself, and Joe was silently fuming. Why didn't we think of it? Mr. Hardy had profited by his previous experience. When the smugglers had seized the detective and tied him to the cot for the second time, he had used a device frequently employed by magicians and professional escape artists, who boast that they can release themselves from tightly tied ropes and straitjackets. The detective had expanded his chest and flexed his muscles. He had also kept his arms as far away from his sides as he could without being noticed. In this way, when relaxed, the ropes did not bind him as securely as his captors intended. Oh, why were Frank and I so dumb? Joe again chided himself. Frank bit his lip in utter disgust at not having remembered the trick. But then he eased his conscience. Dad didn't think of it the first time either. Mr. Hardy had discovered that the rope binding his right wrist on the cot had a slight slack in it. He began trying to work the rope loose. This took a long time, and the rough strands rubbed his wrist raw. But at least he managed to slide his right hand free. "Hooray!" Frank almost shouted. He glanced at the guard. Malloy appeared to be sound asleep. "I hope he stayed that way until we can escape," Frank wished fervently. He and Joe watched their father in amazement as they saw him grope one of the knots. The detective fumbled at it for a while. It was slow work with only one hand free. But the boys knew from his satisfied expression that the smugglers in their haste had not tied the knots as firmly as they should have. At this instant the guard suddenly lifted his head, and Mr. Hardy quickly laid his free hand back to the cot. He closed his eyes as if sleeping, and his sons followed his example. But opening their lids a slit, they watched the smuggler carefully. The guard grunted. "They're okay," he mumbled. Once more he tried to stay awake, but found it impossible. Little by little his head sagged until his chin rested on his chest. Deep, regular breathing told the prisoner he was asleep. Mr. Hardy began now work again on the knot of the rope that kept his left arm bound to the cot. In a matter of moments he succeeded in loosening it, and the rope fell away from his arm. After making sure the guard was still asleep, the detective sat up on the cot and struggled to release his feet. This was an easier task. The smugglers had merely passed a rope around the cot to hold the prisoner's feet. A few minutes' attention was all that was necessary for the boy's father to work his way loose. "Now we can release us," Joe thought excitedly, "and we can escape from here." As Fenton Hardy tiptoed towards his sons, the board floor squeaked loudly. The guard muttered again, as if dreaming, shook his head, then sat up. "Oh no," Frank murmured, fearful of what would happen. He saw his father pick up a white rag someone had dropped. A look of intense amazement crossed Malloy's face. As he opened his mouth to yell for help, Fenton Hardy leaped across the intervening space and flung himself on the smuggler. "Keep quiet," the detective ordered. Malloy had time only to utter a muffled gasp before the detective clapped the hand over the guard's mouth and jumped the rag in it and toppled him to the floor. The two rolled over and over in a desperate silent struggle. The boys, helpless, looked on, their fears mounting. They knew their father had been weakened by his imprisonment and hunger, and the guard was strong and muscular. Nevertheless, the detective had the advantage of a surprise attack. Malloy had no time to collect his wits. Frank and Joe watched the battle in an agony of suspense. If only they could join the fight. Mr. Hardy still had the advantage, for he could breathe better than his opponent, but suddenly Malloy managed to raise himself to the knees. He reached out for the revolver on the hips. "Look out, Dad!" Frank hissed. "He's got a gun!" Quick as a flash, the detective landed a blow on the guard's jaw. Malloy blinked and raised both hands to defend himself as he fell to the ground. Mr. Hardy darted forward and pulled the revolver out of the man's side pockets. "No funny business," the detective told him in a low voice. Without being told, Malloy raised his hands in the air. He sat helplessly on the floor, beaten. "He's got a knife too, Dad," Joe said quietly. "Watch that." "Thanks, Joe. his father replied. Then motioning with the pistol, "All right, let's have the knife," he said. Suddenly the guard removed the knife from his leather sheath at the belt and handed it to Mr. Hardy. Frank and Joe wanted to shout with joy, but merely grinned at their father. Still watching, Malloy, the detective, walked slowly backward until he reached Joe's side. Without taking his eyes from the smuggler, he bent down with the knife, sliced the ropes that bound his son. Fortunately, the knife was sharp and the rope soon were cut. "Boy, that feels good, Dad. Thanks," Joe whispered. He sprang from the chair, took the knife, and while his father watched Malloy, he cut Frank's bonds. "Malloy," Mr. Hardy ordered, "come over here." He motioned toward the bed and indicated by gestures that the smuggler was to lie down on the cot. Malloy shook his head vigorously, but was prodded over by Joe. The guard lay down on the cot. The ropes which had held Mr. Hardy had not been cut. Quickly Frank and Joe trussed up Malloy just as their father had been tied, making certain the knots were tight. As a final precaution, they pushed the gag which slipping was with a piece of rope to make it secure. The whole procedure had taken scarcely 5 minutes. The Hardys were free. "What now?" Frank asked his father out of earshot of Malloy. "Hide someplace until the Coast Guards get here?" Quickly he told about Tony and Chet going to bring the officers to the smuggler's hideout. "But they should be here by now," Joe whispered. "They probably haven't found the secret door. Let's go down and shout them." This plan was agreed upon, but the three Hardys got no farther than the top of the first stairway when they heard rough arguing voices below them. "They can't be the Coast Guard man," said Mr. Hardy. "We'll listen a few seconds, then we'll better run to the other direction. I know the way out from the ground." From below came an ugly, "You double-crosser, you! This loot belongs to the whole gang, and you don't forget it." "Listen," said the second voice. "I don't have to take orders from you. I thought we were pals. Now you don't want to go through with the deal. Who's to know if we got 10 packages or 5 from that friend of Ali Singh's?" "Okay, and the stuff will be easier to get rid than those drugs. They're too hot for me. Snapman can burn for kidnapping if he wants. I don't." The voices had now become so loud that the Hardys did not dare to wait another moment. "Come on," the boy's father urged. He led the way back to the corridor and along it to the door at the end. Suddenly, Frank and Joe noticed him falter and were afraid he was going to faint. Joe recalled that his father had had no food except the candy bar. Ramming his hands into his pockets, he brought out another bar and some pieces of pretzel. Quickly he filled both his father's hands with them. Mr. Hardy ate them hungrily as his son supported him under his arms and assisted him to the door. As Frank quietly opened it, and they saw a stairway beyond, the detective said, "These steps will bring us into a shed near the Pollitt house. There's a trapdoor. That's the way Snapman brought me down. Got your lights? We haven't any time to lose." Mr. Hardy seemed stronger already. "I'll take the lead." As they ascended, Frank and Joe wondered if they would come out in the shed where they had seen a man named Klein picking up small logs. When the detective reached the top of the stairs, he ordered the lights out and pushed against the trapdoor. He could not budge it. "You try," he urged the boys, "and hurry. Those men we heard may discover Malloy." "And then things will start popping," Frank murmured. The boys heaved their shoulders against the trapdoor. In a moment there came a rumble of rolling logs. The door went up easily. Frank peered out. No one seemed to be around. He stepped up into the shed and the others followed. The three stood in silence. The night was dark. The wind blowing through the trees made a moaning sound. Before the Hardys rose the gloomy mass of the house on the cliff. No lights could be seen. From the direction of the lane came dull, thundering sounds. The boys and their father assumed the smuggler's truck was being loaded with the goods, which were to be disposed of by the man named Burke. Suddenly the Hardys heard voices from the corridor they had just left. Quickly Frank closed the trapdoor and Joe piled up the logs. Then, silently, the Hardys strolled out into the yard. Chapter 17. Hostages. Lithe as Indians, the three Hardys hurried across the lawn and disappeared among the trees. They headed for the road a good distance away. "I hope a bus comes along," Frank said to himself. "Then we can get to a phone and report." His thought was rudely interrupted as the boys and their father heard a sound that struck terror to their hearts. The clatter of locks tumbling off the trap-door. An instant later came a hoarse shout. "Chief! Red! The Hardys got away! Watch out for them!" "He must be one of the men we heard coming up from the shore," Joe decided. "They must have found Malloy trussed up." Instantly the place became alive with smugglers, flashing their lights. Some of the men ran from the truck towards the road shouting. Others began to comb the woods. Another man emerged from the trapdoor. He and his companion dashed to the ocean side of the house. Two burly smugglers flung open the kitchen door and ran out. One shouted, "They ain't in the house!" "And they're not down the shore," the other yelled. "I just talked to Klein on the phone down there." "You guys better not let loose those Hardys," Snedman's voice cut through the night. "I'll be the pan for all of you." "Fenton Hardy's got a gun. He took Malloy's," came a warning voice from the far side of the house. The two men who had gone in the front now returned. "He never misses the mark." When the fracas had started, the detective had pulled his sons to the ground, told them to lie flat, face down and not to move. Now they could hear the pounding steps of smugglers as they dashed among the trees. The boys' hearts pounded wildly. It did not seem possible that they could be missed. Yet man after man ran within a few yards of the three prone figures and dashed toward the road. Presently Mr. Hardy raised his head and looked toward the polished mansion. "Boys," he said tensely, "we'll make a run for the kitchen door. The man won't expect us to go there." The three arose. Swiftly and silently they crossed the dark lawn and slipped into the house. Apparently no one had seen them. "When Snedman doesn't find us outdoors," Joe whispered, "won't he look here to make sure?" "Yes," Mr. Hardy replied, "but by the time I hope the Coast Guard and State Police will arrive." "Joe and I found a hidden stairway to the attic," Frank spoke up. "Snedman won't think of looking in it. Let's hide up there." "You forget the ghost," Joe reminded his brother. "He knows we found the stairways." "Nevertheless, Frank's suggestion is a good one," Mr. Hardy said. "Let's go to the attic. Were any clothes hanging in the closet that might be used to conceal the door?" "Yes, a man's bathrobe on a rod." The Hardys did not dare to use a light and had to make their way along the feeling walls and the stair banister, with Frank in the lead and Mr. Hardy between the boys. Reaching the second floor, Frank looked to the rear window of the hall. "The smugglers are coming back," he remarked in a low voice. "The lights are heading this way." The Hardys doubled their speed, but it was still slow going, for they banged into chairs and a wardrobe as Frank felt his way along the hall towards the bedroom where the hidden staircase was. Finally the trio reached it. Just as Frank was about to open the door to the attic, a door on the first floor swung open with a resounding bang. "Scatter and search every room!" Snedman's voice rang out. "We're trapped," Joe groaned. "Maybe not," Frank said hopefully. "I have a hunch Klein was the ghost. It's possible that he's the only one who knows about this stairway, and he's down at the shore." "We'll risk going up," Mr. Hardy decided, "but not a sound." He slipped the bathrobe across the rod so it would hide the door. "The stairs creak," Joe informed him. Mr. Hardy told his sons to push down the retreat slowly but firmly with their hands and hold them there until they put one foot between them and raise up to the full weight. "And lean forward, so you don't lose your balance," he warned. Fearful that he could not accomplish this, Frank opened the door carefully and stared up at the pitch blackness. But the dread thought of capture made him use extreme caution, and he reached the attic without having made a sound. After closing the door, Joe and his father quickly followed. The three moved noisily to a spot out of sight on the stairway behind a large trunk. They sat down and waited, not daring even to whisper. From downstairs they could hear running footsteps, banging doors, and loud talk. "Not here! They're not here! Not here!" The search seemed to come to an end, for the second-floor group had gathered right in the room where the secret stairway was. "That's it! The end! They're going to search up here," Frank thought woefully. His father reached over and grasped the hand of each of his sons in a reassuring grip. Someone yanked open the closet door. The Hardys became tense. Would the rope of the entrance to the secret stairway fool him? "Empty," the man announced, and then shut the door. The smugglers went downstairs. There were fervent handshakes among the detective and his sons. Other than this, they did not move a muscle of their bodies, although they inwardly relaxed. Now new worries assailed the Hardys. It was possible that Snapman and his gang, having been alerted, would move out and disappear before the police or Coast Guard could get to the house on the cliff. Frank's heart gave a jump. He suddenly realized that his father was hiding to protect his sons. Had he been alone, the intrepid detective would have been downstairs battling to get the better of Snapman and break up the smuggling ring. What a swell father he is, Frank thought. Then came another idea. Maybe being here isn't such a bad plan after all. Dad might have been fatally shot if been anywhere else on the property. A moment later the Hardys again became aware of voices on the second floor. They recognized one of Snapman's, the other as Klein's. "Yeah, there's a secret stairway on the attic," Klein announced. "I found it when I was playing ghosts, and them Hardy boys, they found it too. I'll bet my last tape that those rare drugs we're getting tonight, that the Dick and his sons are up in the attic." The Hardy spirits sank. They were going to be captured after all. They heard the door at the foot of the stairway open. "Go up and look, Klein," ordered Snapman. "Not me. Fenton Hardy has Malloy's gun." "I said go up." "You can't make me," Klein objected in a whining tone. "I'd be sure target. 'Cause I couldn't see him. He'd be hiding and let me have so quick that I never know what hit me." Despite the grave situation, Frank and Joe's faces were seized in smiles, but they faded as Snapman said, "I'll go myself. Give me that big light." Suddenly a brilliant beam was cast into the attic. It moved upward, accompanied by heavy footsteps. "Hardy, if you want to live, say so," Snapman, an evil ring in his voice, said. No answers from the detective. "We've got you cornered this time." Mr. Hardy did not reply. "Listen, Hardy," Snapman shouted. "I know you're up here because you moved that bathrobe. I'll give you just 1 minute to come out and down and out of that attic." Still no answer, and an interval of silence followed. Then came Snapman's voice again. "This is your last chance, Hardy." Nearly a minute went on without a sign from the two enemy camps. Then Snapman moved up the stairs a few more steps. "Hardy, I have a proposition to make to you. I know you don't want to die, and you don't want those boys of you to live too. Well, I want to live as well, so let's call it quits." The detective maintained his silence, and Snapman continued up the steps. "I give you my word that you won't shoot, and I know you never fire unless you have to." A moment later he appeared at the top of the stairs, empty-handed except for the light. In a moment he spotted the Hardys with his high-powered flashlight. "Here's the proposition. Your lives in exchange for mine and my gang's." "How do you mean?" Mr. Hardy asked coldly. "I mean," the smuggler said, "that you are my hostages." "Hostages?" Frank and Joe exclaimed together. "Yes. If my men and I can get our stuff moved away before the police or the Coast Guard might happen to be here, then you can leave a little later." "But if they come?" Frank asked. "Then I'll bargain with them," Snapman answered, "and I don't think they'll turn me down. They don't know where you are, but I'll make them understand I mean business." If they take me, you three die." Frank and Joe gasped. The famous Fenton Hardy and his sons were to be the usual, used as a shield to protect a useless gang of criminals. The boys looked at their father in consternation. To their amazement, he looked calm, but his mouth was drawn in a tight line. "It won't do you any good to shoot me, Hardy," the smuggler said. "Malloy said all the chambers in the Gate are empty but one. If the gang hears a shot, they'll be up here in a minute to finish you all properly." The Hardys realized that if Snapman's remark about the gun was true, they were indeed at the mercy of this cunning, scheming, conniving smuggler. He now started back toward the stairway. "I think I'm a pretty fair guy," he said, with the trace of a satisfied smile. "I don't want to be hated and feared," Joe thought in a rage. "We've got to outwit this man somehow," he determined. But at the moment the possibility of this looked hopeless.